Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast, a podcast where we explore the innate connection between the mind, the body and the soil. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Smart Soil. Smart Soil is an online education platform creating courses and providing resources from farmers for farmers. Join us as we share the stories and experiences from those dedicated to regenerating ecosystems, communities and human beings. Welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast. Today we are joined by farmer and Regen Agriculture advocate, Stuart McAlpine. Bloody good to have you on the show, Stuart. Thanks for joining us, mate. How you going?
Thanks, David. Great to be chatting to you again.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. So if you want to check out a little video we've done with Stuart, check out the YouTube channel. We were out at a field day he did a couple of years ago, and yeah, good turnout. And haven't been out there for a while, Stuart, but you were just saying before we jumped on the call here that you had the best season last year that you've had, and then this has been a bit of your worst year of production. Did you want to just talk a little bit about that to start us off, and then we'll jump back into some of the deeper sort of journey stuff and what inspired you to change?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, look, last year was our worst production year ever, and rainfall was very varied across the farm actually, which was interesting when it came to harvest, because we were virtually getting ranges from 0 through to 3 tonne. Not much of that. Like we averaged 0.37 of a tonne to the hectare on the wheat, and didn't harvest the lupins, and canola was less than 0.2. So, but we just had big areas of crop that died, and we've never seen that before. So we actually, where we used my rainfall at the house wasn't quite as bad. But what it did show was how good we are at growing grain, in very limited rainfall. Mm-hmm. So I just think we went stub. A lot of it was probably only 120 mils for the year. Like at my house here was 170, but effectively sort of ranging between probably 100 to 140 during the growing season, which is not a lot of rainfall, but we did see some interesting stuff. And the cattle have come out of it really well. We had intended to trade some cattle, so that allowed us a bigger area to run them over, and they're looking really good sort of under the biological system as well. So it was really bad. Unfortunately, we had a good year. So, it's I find it a bit strange that we've had our best year ever followed by our worst year ever. And in fact, the last 5 or 6 years haven't been too bad, really. I mean, we've had those, 2019 was pretty ordinary, and 17. But yeah, I did look at some of the climate data, and, we're certainly, comparing the last 5 years to the last 100, we've seen a reduction of 40 millimetres in the growing season, which is equivalent to half a tonne based on the 12.5 kilos per millimetre of rainfall, which is probably can do better, can do worse.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was that during the growing season, the maximum temperature has probably increased by about a unit, and so has the minimum. So we're seeing 2 degree extra heat units as well, which is obviously has effectively another 40 mil effect on evaporation. So that's another drop in half a tonne. So effectively, you're sort of looking at long historical average of 3.25 tonnes to the hectare down to about 2.25. So look, numbers are numbers at the end of the day. Like, they can swing and change, but I think there is a trend towards less growing season rainfall, even though over that 100 years our ROP has only been about 10 or 15 mils of rain over the whole season.
Okay. Hey guys, David here from SmartEDU. SmartEDU.com is the place to be for all your latest and greatest regenerative agriculture courses, free media content, town halls with experts, and heaps of other exciting stuff. Make sure you head on over to SmartEDU.com and become a part of the tribe. See you next time. All right. And so for folks that aren't familiar with your enterprise, Stuart, did you want to just give us a quick run through of what enterprises you're running out there, I guess the soil type and sort of where you're based geographically?
Yeah, so we farm a little place called Buntine, which is about 260, 70 kilometres northeast of Perth. We farm mainly lighter soils with a little bit of clay in them, so they're actually work quite well in our environment because they're a little bit forgiving, so they do hold on to the moisture a bit, but allow sort of, I guess, crops to germinate a little bit easier compared to sort of the better soil types we have, where you probably need 70 mils of rain to sort of get them away to a good start. I mean, you don't need that much, but ideally that's what you'd get. So we're a bit mixed, and then I run some cattle here, so we're up to about 200 breeders at the moment, and wow. We'll probably talk a bit later on when you ask me one of the questions, and we're cropping as well, so we grow wheat, lupins, and canola mainly, and been heavily involved sort of with wide open agriculture and the development of Buntine protein and the lupins, and hopefully getting the price of lupins up towards some of the other commodities to make them sort of pay their own way a little bit in the year of production. So
yeah, and they're fitting in pretty well into the, I guess, being a sort of synergistic crop to have within the program as well, aren't they? Being a nitrogen fixer as so how are you going about integrating the lupins into your, I guess, enterprise spread?
Yeah, well, we've been growing lupins since the late 70s, early 80s. We're one of the first ones to grow them in Western Australia, and have been sort of in the mix ever since, really, and gone through the highs and the lows of lupins. So they've always been part of it. And I think, from some of the work that I've been doing with downforce technologies on sort of measuring carbon, certainly the broadleafs, the lupins, and the canola are probably putting more carbon into the system than what the cereals are. So, I mean, moving forward, I think it's looking at more of the sort of biodiverse, multi-species planting, moving into cropping. But, as I'm sure we'll talk about as the conversation goes, financing change is probably one of the major constraints to sort of changing to more regenerative systems, and I guess the research that needs to go with that to give us the confidence to do it as well.
100%, chicken and the egg, isn't it? So speaking of which, you are now involved in an amazing, I guess, are you guys a company now, RegenWA, or is it non-for-profit?
So we're a company, just transitioned to a company limited by guarantee. So I've been on the steering committee, I think, since 2017 with a lot of the other wonderful colleagues and regenerative farmers in Western Australia, which I won't name because I might miss someone. But so it's been a long journey, but we've moved to this structure to try and enable a little bit more flexibility and autonomy, I suppose, for RegenWA. So I don't think there's ever a perfect vehicle for everything you do, but hopefully this will suit Regen really well, and certainly I think it's evident that the whole regen movement is really about to sort of spread out to the wider community, because certainly from my visits overseas last year, there's a massive push towards agroecological sort of regenerative practices as in our food production.
How exciting! Finally, especially for blokes like you, mate, that have been freaking chipping away at it for donkey's years. I mean, it's good to hear that it's spreading abroad, and I mean, we're always a little bit slow to catch up out west, but I mean, we're actually lucky in this case that we have a lot of pioneers like yourself and the Haggertys and that have sort of been, I guess, blazing a bit of a trail in this stuff. Did you want to just give a little overview of what RegenWA do and what their focuses are, Stuart, and then and we'll
So I guess it's sort of aiming to support farmers through that change, I suppose, into more regenerative based practices, and sort of provide them with a resource to sort of work with other organisations as well, and organise field days and all those sorts of things. So it's pretty comprehensive, but and we've obviously been doing that for a while. Last year we they conducted a lot of workshops, and we're involved in obviously the Regen Ag conference down at Margaret River as well. Christine Jones, Bruce Maynard, Graham Sate. So lots of field days with sort of people, and and just sharing that. And I think actually I believe that the new website is just about to be to be released. So that's going to be pretty exciting, I think. So yeah, I think they had 23 events last year, and
wow,
1,135 people attended, and 538 of them were farmers. So so yeah, and it's a pretty. I think we have over 2,000 people, 2,066 members. So it's wow, quite a large group, and obviously we're going to transition those across to the new organisation. But yeah, so look, it's been a fantastic thing to be set up, and I think it's in a great space to assist and obviously working with other organisations, because I think that's like I'm not sure whether you're aware, but I was co-founder of the Liebe Group, and our motto is working together in agriculture, and I've always been a bit advocate for working together, because resources are so limited. So we must really try and find a way to collaborate extensively. And that's been a little bit difficult sometimes, because the funding environment's so competitive, and it's sort of a bit anti that at times. But but we do need to work together, and certainly RegenWA are working very collaboratively with people within West Australia, across Australia, and now sort of with links to Regen10, where we're working with them as well. So so that's really, really exciting. So really exciting on the work it's done so far. But I think moving forward, I think it can really take a critical lead in I think what is going to be a massive change in the way we implement our food production systems in West Australia and across Australia and beyond.
Hey guys, David here from SmartEDU. If you're liking what you hear, make sure you head over to smartsoiledu.com to learn the latest and greatest in regenerative agriculture. Thanks for watching. Now back to the show. Absolutely, mate. It's a very exciting time, I think. Now, I think it's a good time probably can we explain a little bit about what Regen10 is? And you mentioned that you went overseas to COP28 and the Accelerating Food Systems Transformation discussion. So that's pretty amazing, mate. A bloody farmer from Buntine heading over to the big shakers and movers. So can you talk us a bit through that journey?
Yeah, I can. So it's, I mean, obviously it's Regen10 is an organisation that's been set up by, I think initially mainly some philanthropic organisations, seeing a need to sort of get a better description of what regenerative agriculture is, also what we should be measuring. So they did a desktop evaluation of all the different regenerative type stuff that was over there, like a lot of, and to try and develop a framework basically, but an outcomes-based framework, which I think is really, really important, because I'm a firm believer is, there's tools that we use. So that's important to know what they are. But at the end of the day, like, we should be setting what outcomes that we want to see, because that allows for different landscapes to employ the best tools to achieve those outcomes that we're looking for as a society, rather. And it allows for, the innovation that farmers always bring to the table. So rather than being prescriptive, you must do this to do this. Well, let's just, get involved in what we want to see at the end of the day. So that's really exciting. So developing that up has been what they have been doing. So I think early supporters was through IKEA Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation as well. And then there's been a few more come in. I shouldn't quote them in case I get it wrong. I think it's the McKnight Foundation, but quite a lot of support. And a lot of support from big industry as well, coming into this regenerative space, and sort of some of the people that have been measuring it, including the big chem companies, big food companies. One of the things we did out of Italy was really focus on making sure the farmers were front and center, and it was great to see that language continued at COP. But realise so their approach is around building a greater evidence base and sharing that understanding. Developing a sort of holistic and integrated outcomes framework, connecting a growing network of regenerative leaders and practitioners. Now, that's really, really important. I think that's something that we've been missing out on in WA. Like, there's a lot of good stuff. We're doing a lot of great stuff here, and there's a lot of great stuff happening elsewhere. So to actually link that up is really good and inspirational for each other. champion voices to shape the policy and finance enabling environment. So I think we've already touched on finance, and we, research is up there as well as one of the critical things that we're missing, and just encourage the global momentum. So that's the mandate, and I think that was probably missing out there. Like, lots of people doing a lot of stuff. So I think this is an attempt, and I think it's going really well so far to try and sort of get some sort of framework to everything we're doing, and I think that's important, because if we can work towards that, then we can work more together and ensure that we have a framework that encompasses the differences that are required for different landscapes and different climatic conditions around the world. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was great to be part of 22 people that really pulled that apart over sort of a week in Bellagio in Italy. And it was great for me to be with like-minded people and to be really inspired with some high-level thinking. So that was good. And then the reason I got invited to COP was just as a farmer, basically, because there is a recognition that everything has to be farmer-centric. So to get us there to COP, to be part of the conversations, to share our stories, because it's the first time that food's been included as a topic into COP, and that they didn't quite get where they wanted to do in the final agreement, but a lot of people signed off on agriculture, including the Australian government. So very, very exciting to be there, and I think we need to find a way to support our farmers and our appropriate grower groups like Reg NWA and other organisations to actually get to these international events, to ensure that we're part of the conversations and participating in design with our input and bringing back some of that. But also, I think we've probably missed out on a lot of grant and funding opportunity in Australia as well, that's potentially available to help sort of, I guess, guide us through this next stage of sort of food systems transformation.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and so I just want to draw a big underline underneath that farmer-centric focus, and farmers having their voice heard in this, because I mean, if it's anything we know, it's that if we go this top-down approach again and have the big end of town telling us how it's done, farmers don't really like getting told what to do and how to do it generally. So it's good to have you there, representing farmers, mate. And so what were the discussions like there, and how did you feel, I guess, mingling with those big players? Did they get it? I mean, I imagine they would.
Yeah, they do. Look, I still have I still think one of the things that's really lacking is getting people out onto country. And you've been out on my country, so you know what I'm talking about. I think sometimes there's a bit of an ideological approach, from all extremes, I suppose. And I think sometimes until you get out on country, onto the land, and actually experience the good and the bad, it's not until then you really actually get a sense of what's possible or why we need to change. And although I'm honoured to have been to 2 events, I don't really feel as if my experiential capital or my knowledge has been extracted out of me to a wider audience. And I guess it's like everything, everyone's playing catch up, and that's part of the problem. But I feel that is going to happen, and that's something that I really want to, because I think, and you always, some of you great podcast people always ask those really good questions, about, what we discover, and I've probably seen that lacking a little bit, and I think the intent is unbelievably strong across all sectors. Intent's one thing, delivery is another one, so that's the challenge.
Absolutely,
mate. Now I think you followed on with a question after.
I guess what were the discussions surrounding, like, I guess, where was the focus primarily? Was it all carbon, or was it, more biodiversity, supporting farmers and like, I guess those exciting areas that we're so passionate about?
Yeah, so it probably was a little bit more holistic than just carbon. So it was definitely around biodiversity, being a key indicator. Carbon's, quite a good proxy for that in some instances, but it gets a little bit caught up in the whole sort of balancing act, which is probably missing the real point of the value of carbon is much greater than that, and its role with sort of increasing biodiversity and as an energy source, I suppose, to drive that change. So so I think the key things out of COP. So COP was a little bit different from obviously Regen10's the Regen10 meeting, but was a realization that to have this transition in our food systems that are, the externalized unaccounted costs are estimated sort of somewhere between 10 to 15 trillion dollars a year that we just take from ecosystem services on a global level. And then I think if you add health to that on top of it, you're talking about massive gains. So that's been recognized. And then how do we fund that transition and that change? I don't think it needs to be that great from my experiences, but I still think there's some missing gaps in knowledge at that higher level as well. I think they think, oh, you fix that and it's a done job. It's not. Like it's a journey that goes forever. We're getting better and better as we go. So I think there's a little bit of farmer knowledge or First Nations knowledge that's missing from some of that sort of top level, which I don't think they're going to get until they get out on country. So they're talking a lot about being paid for biodiversity as an income stream to sort of replace some of that, which is exciting, and carbon will fit into that as well. And then the potential for renewable energy as an income source as well. So that might be mechanical, or it might be in biofuels or some other way as well. To increase biodiversity. So and I think I mean, for me, we talk about energy. The greatest energy of all is the energy we digest ourselves as human beings. And I think there was a bit of talk around food security and the effect that these huge climate swings are potentially going to have, and I think that's underlying some of this discussion. But we should have got some water in here. I think and then there's a lot of talk around finance and the things that we need to do, but a lot of discussion.
What really lit you up about, I mean, what was your key takeaway, I guess, from these two meetings? And they could be two different takeaways, I guess, on Regen10 and COP28, but what excited you most, and what was your...
I think what excited me was that there is a real push towards restoring some of the natural systems in our food production as being a key thing to do, not only because of the impact that agriculture is having on these unaccounted costs and biodiversity loss and soil erosion and losing forests and all that sort of stuff, but also the system is broken, but using it as a tool to restore some of the natural systems that we need to restore some of that buffering that biodiversity and natural systems do on our climate.
You said something pretty awesome there about like the energy that we put in our bodies given food. I mean, it's a powerful force for change, and I mean everyone that's at least grateful enough to live in the West, eats 3 meals a day. So every time they're eating, they're having a choice of where they support and where they put their money. So what do you see as I guess the power of good food and farming? What do you see as that sort of, I guess, as a massive lever for change? How powerful is it?
It is probably, I believe, and I think there's a growing agreement that it is the most powerful reason of all. I think that the integrity of our food has been lost as we've commodified it. I think the transference of the health that the microbiome brings to food integrity and the compounds that it produces within our food have definitely been lost as we've moved towards more commodity-based production system that's all been about yield and not so much about soil health and biodiversity health. So I think, the transference of the microbiome as the tool that actually builds soil health and releases minerals that are locked up in the landscape. And yeah, look, we're going to have to bring some stuff into different landscapes for sure. But building that integrity of the food and the health, the transference of that microbiome from sort of the soil to the plants, to the animals, and to us and to the ecosystem is what's going to give health. And I think, I know we talk about this, so, and that, coupled with, I think, we know from, might be jumping forward a little bit, but
right.
we know that from mental health and stuff like that, with some of the medicinal things that they prescribe in chemicals and stuff like that, I feel that that's what's gone out of our food. That balance is not there.
Yes.
And then if you look at the concrete jungles and, beautiful buildings, maybe, Dubai, well, what a place, it's just like you're in a sci-fi movie. And yeah, it's sort of really beautiful, but like, it's not like going out into a forest or whatever, where it's beautiful every time you go out there. So, the mental health on sort of, blue and green, on water and on green landscapes is a big known factor in what we're doing. So I think, bringing food production back closer to our cities and bringing people amongst the beauty of sort of animals and plants and understanding where those calories come from is really important. But the integrity of that food is what we've basically destroyed, I think. And so I think the combination of all those factors are coming. I think there's a growing awareness that we can through our food systems, we can solve a lot of our health issues as well, because most of our health is non-communicable related. It's not communicable problem, it's non-communicable. And I think food is going to have a great role into sort of restoring some of that balance as well.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and it's so true. We eat, aren't we? And I think Joel Salatin says that wicked line. That's like, pay your farmer now or pay your doctor later or something. It's so true. And I think we're seeing
absolutely.
that. You sort of alluded a little bit there to, I guess, the mental health crisis that's not only happening out on country with farmers, which I think we can focus on here for this discussion, but in a broader societal sense, there is a real, I guess, rising of all these incredibly complex conditions, generally in the mental state. And I think that could have a part role due to technology and I guess just how quick that is changing and how, I guess, we're not as connected to country anymore because of these things. But I guess on the flip side, there is an opportunity to connect potentially more, to discover and access this information. So I think to bring it into probably you're more probably qualified to talk about this, as you are still out in country and you're a farmer. But what are you seeing in terms of the mental health crises out on country, and how do you think we go about solving this, or what are some solutions?
Yeah, well, great question. And it is real. I mean, and I haven't heard the facts lately, but I have had quoted to me and do quote that suicide rates are twice what they are in the city and regional areas. But you are absolutely spot on correct. It's a huge issue everywhere, and I think there's lots of factors that contribute to that and the pressures that we actually have. But yeah, so it is a real problem. I think, I mean, it's massive, mate. It really is. And I think, we have an average age, I think, in Australia of farmers at 60. I think I always follow that average age. Actually, I'm 61 next week. Or
there you go.
Sunday. But thanks, mate. So, we need to encourage our young people back into agriculture. We're probably pretty lucky where I'm from, around Delhi. Like, we actually do have quite a few young kids coming back, and there has been a bit of resurgence. I think, having good access, there's probably other economic drivers in Delhi that sort of have seen the population increase, which I was involved in sort of converting that a bit as well for Regional Repopulation Initiative. So, but getting back to the pressures that we're expecting, at global level. I think the average ages are pretty similar in a lot of the Western countries like Canada, US, UK. I think they're lower in Africa, but maybe the age longevity is actually probably lower as well. So we need to, we do need to encourage people into producing the only fuel we really need, which is food at the end of the day. And how do we, food production has been, take the good times with the bad as a farmer. And, we've made it work, and, there's been debt created of that. And certainly debt is part of everything that we do, not just farmers, which is probably not great, but it's just how it's gone. So, we need to, if we are going to see greater swings, we're going to see probably better good years, and we're going to see deeper bad years. And how do we manage that with the swings in commodity and inputs and stuff like that? And how do we encourage, new people into agriculture? But how do we actually make sure, are you okay? Are they well looked after and supported? So there's massive challenges there. For us as societies to actually issue that, I lost a cousin last year to cancer who's been gone from the farm for a long time. But he when he was at the doctor's, the first thing the doctor asked him, are you a farmer? And that's, and I think about that and I go, and we don't really, we don't know how safe a lot of the products are we're using. And anecdotally, this, and you think, what right have we also got as society to actually create an economic system that forces, in a way, farmers to sort of use that pesticide system because we want to just, make it as high yielding as possible, without accounting for all the other factors that go into it. So, we've got some huge questions that we have to come to grips with as a society, and health is not confined to obviously farmers, but and then a lot of farmers I think are turning to medicine to help them, get through the farming operation, and I maybe think sometimes that makes them sort of feel superhuman, and they're sort of taking on huge amounts of risk and, elasticity, but, you just hope it doesn't break, and every now and then it does break, and we see horrible things happen. So.
Absolutely, mate. Sorry to hear if you lost your cousin, mate. That's no good. And obviously a all too common story, like you say, with all the crazy chemicals that farmers are forced to use nowadays, as their farm ecosystems collapse due to this being flogged. There's actually a phenomenon that we talk about a bit on the podcast, and we just like to ask our guests, I guess anecdotally, because it's pretty hard to collect data on this stuff, but as you go, and I'm sure you've been out into lots of regenerative farms and farms that are really thriving, that are biodiverse, and life's coming back. But what we've seen from a sort of outsider point of view is that generally when we are on those farms, the farmers themselves are really happy and vibrant, and they're just excited about life and what they do, whereas they're not dragging their boots or whatnot. So is that something that you could stand by, Stuart, and it's something that you've seen out on these sorts of properties?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think we probably do come from a different space, and we have probably seen the wonder of working with nature. I think the challenge is actually, getting hold of all the tools that can sort of make that transition happen to where I think we all could take it to if we're able to. I think that's coming. I think we need to be rewarded well with finance, and I think it's less than 1% of global finance goes into agriculture that's supporting change. They were the figures from COP, and there's a recognition there. There's a commitment there from a lot of the big banks and finance institutions. I think we know that's there already, but I think they're really struggling to find a way of actually making that happen. And maybe that's where Regen10 are getting to provide measurement or those frameworks that enable that type of support to happen. So yeah, but I think one of the problems is that regenerative agriculture isn't a box, like it isn't a recipe. It's a journey, and I think that's a struggle for most farmers to understand, because they're used to putting things in a box, like this is what you're going to do. But I think we need to understand that nature is going to test everything that we do, and it's going to try and not break it, but it's going to throw everything at it. And it might seem like it's trying to bust it and trying to break it, but I think actually it's just trying to always make it improve and always be resilient for the next test that might come along at one point in time, so that we're actually still moving forward. So I think that's part of the struggle, and I think a lot of the regen farmers have been able to understand that. It's not a journey that has a destination. I'm not sure that some of the high level stuff have quite worked out. They think, you just get this going, and then all of a sudden we've got all this. It's a thing that should continue to improve. If you look at energy again, like energy starts with the sun. Every energy that's created comes from the sun. Food can't do it without the sun generally. Some use a lot less. There's stuff growing 3 kilometers down under the sea and stuff like that, but it's still getting some sunlight down there. So we need to understand that food production has to build that energy back into the soil, as well as provide food, fiber, and shelter for us. We need to understand that we can't extract all that energy and put it into production, because we're giving nothing back to the soil to actually build its resilience and build its capacity for change, but also for efficiency as well, and for biodiversity, because biodiversity is really, really important. If it's not there, then you've got less diversity to survive change, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. That's so interesting. Mate, it's interested just to touch on your sort of personal experience too, out on your place, and some of the ways, I guess, or methods that you're implementing to encourage that diversity back into the system. You mentioned microbiome earlier, about getting that out onto country, and I guess we're putting it out, we're getting it back. So what are some of the practices and tools that you're reaching for to implement this regenerative system on your place?
Yeah, look, I'm still learning, and I reckon I've only just scratched the surface. But I think when I went and I try and do this now, when people say you farm, what do you farm? And I actually try to say the microbiome, because I think if we actually concentrate on getting that right, so the rhizosphere and the little, the lower level organisms in the soil, then I mentioned earlier, sort of, if they're healthy, then the plants are healthy. What we harvest is healthy. What animals graze is healthy, and then what we digest from them is healthy. But that spreads across the landscape as well. So for me, it's actually probably starts with trying to increase biological activity, particularly on whatever we're doing. So whether that be pastures or plants, and that's a pretty easy thing to actually do. All you need is a shovel, and you can try different products, and you can compare which products are stimulating more of that rhizosheath health in your soil, because I think that's the foundation that you need to work with.
Hey guys, sorry for interrupting, but it's David here from SmartEDU.com. If you like perennial agriculture or other things that get you excited, or things like plant diversity, make sure you check out our native grass seed range. We've got all the greatest types of these amazing plants that have been adapted for billions of years. Make sure you head on over to smartsoil.com.au to check out our native grass seed range. Thanks for watching.
I think the other thing we need to know then is what is lacking really in our soil, and it just amazes me that, like, if you look at a lot of the research on building carbon, like it's actually going under the assumption that we have to truck every nutrient in to build carbon. Gee, well, that never happened when nature built all these wonderful ecosystems. And I know it took, zillions and zillions of years to do that. So I don't want to be facetious about that. But
Yes.
I think the next step is to know what resources we have on farm, that are tied up, what minerals we have at depth, and how we can use plants to work with biology to release those nutrients and turn it into soil, basically, and increase our productivity and resilience. And then only really apply the others in sort of a stimulating type effect, or bring them in when they obviously are lacking, or find out what areas in the landscape do have those nutrients and see if we can employ technologies that have been done with using animals to transport those nutrients around, or whether we can potentially mine some of those nutrients and spread them in more mechanical ways. So I see that we need to use some of the wonderful technology that has probably got us into trouble, but can also help speed up some of these natural processes if we use them to assist natural processes rather than take over from those natural processes.
Yes, and I'm assuming there, if people didn't cotton on to what you were saying there, I think biotechnologies, you were talking about those mobile biodigesters or ruminating animals like sheep and cows and hoof and things. And it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think like that, their ability, like you're saying, to then take nutrients from one area and spread it around the property, or like what Diney and Haggerty are doing so well in going into those native areas and bringing that microbiome out into the cropping paddocks, is really, really inspiring. Actually, something that'd be interesting to get I was having a chat with Stuart Andrews on the podcast the other day, and he was saying that it's not just one animal either that we need to be employing. So that diversity of animals too, in bringing them back in. So, and which is, like you say, it's how nature would have done it. It wouldn't have just had one species of animal out there just doing the job. So, yeah, is that something you're looking into as well, or the cattle obviously just suit sort of your context at this stage?
Yeah, no, look, absolutely, and I think if we look at any business, like it really is only funded on the big swallowing up the small, and ag's been the same. Like we end up with these big land units that you swallow the neighbour up, and you get more efficiencies from machinery but that's finite, like you end up with 2 chemical companies in the world, or 2 fertilizer companies, or 2 supermarkets, or 2 farmers,
Which is sort of where we're at, isn't it? Like this
it is where we're at. So I think we need to expand our diversity a bit like we used to do before we got to the Green Revolution. And we need to expand our operations horizontally, vertically, sorry. We've had this horizontal expansion, but we need to vertically stack enterprises again. It's been really difficult in our environment because it's tough and hot and dry. So we don't have, the Joel Sultan type ability from a fairly soft, non-brittle environment. But it's horses for courses, so we can design things around that. And then there's lots of challenges to that. The whole land ownership is an interesting one. It's where we're at, so it's what we've got. But how do we encourage people to come and share farm and stack those enterprises on farm, and support that in a way? Because actually, if we're going to speed things up fast enough, we do need to stack enterprises and get that enterprise diversity as well. We need more work on multi-species cropping. We need more perennials back in our landscape. I mean, we've seen methane producing animals demonized a fair bit, but gee, they can actually digest the plants that actually can bring the minerals up from way below to the surface to build new soil for some of our staple crops. And you can argue how important they really are as well, but that's where we're at the moment. Or we can truck potassium in from Canada, or nitrogen from the Middle East. It's like, I think fundamentally methane's it is obviously a very powerful greenhouse gas, but we do know that the greater diversity in the diet of the animals that are grazing, the less methane, the more efficient, they are. We're the same. Animals are the same, so it's just adding that diversity back into the landscape. Traditionally animals would graze, more than 50 different species of plant, but none of them the same. None of them the same. No animal, no human has the same need. That's part of that interesting sort of fact. There is an average, but an average isn't really an average. For me, might not be very healthy. It might be close to being good for you. So we have that inherent ability to retune ourselves to understand what food types we need to be digesting as well. And animals are very, very good at doing that. Very, very good at doing it. They haven't lost that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to that, what you mentioned at the start, is that we need to get more young crew into agriculture, because if we are going to go vertical and get more enterprises on farm, it requires more manpower or more people out on country too, which is obviously, you speak to everyone, it's what we need to do. We need to get more people out on country, and people are screaming out, trying to find talent and people that are just passionate about it to come out and, they're open book really to come out and start whatever they want up on a lot of farms, especially like you mentioned as well, that the farming age is an average of 60. So I'm sure there's, how do we get those young crew excited and to come out?
Yeah, well, particularly when we've let the infrastructure, around schools and sort of, hospitals and all that sort of stuff decline as well. So, you need that sort of support as well. One of the reasons I got involved in the repopulation to try and save a little school of Buntine, because the numbers were too low, So how, and one of the solutions was to do that, but the government in their wisdom closed the school, and that ended some projects that might have brought some people in, because you're not going to bring them in if you haven't got a school to send them. So now, my neighbours that have come home that are in between me and my children who aren't going to, be farmers. We're 70. We're 70 kilometres from Dowallanyu. You're like, it's just too hard to send a little kid to primary school. So and then so if you're cropping, you can perhaps commute out. But yeah, I don't know. I don't actually see how continuous cropping ultimately will work. It's just going to become unaffordable in the end. I mean, technology will continue to come up with solutions, but technology that's affordable, I don't think so.
No, it'll be the big players that get bigger horizontally, like you say, and that's a shame. Can we talk a little bit about that repopulation initiative, Stuart, and what sort of, did it work? And obviously not extremely well if they're closing the school, but that sounds like a pretty important project.
Yeah, it was. So I went to the Dowallanyu Shire Council in 2010 with an initiative around sort of, particularly at that time, we had a lot of boat people coming in and they were being locked up. And we as farmers, and we're very lucky that we have quite a reasonable light industry happening in Dowallanyu. And they were really struggling to get people to want to move away from the coastline. As we know, we're the most urbanised country in the world, and most of that is around our capital cities. And older generation Australians just, I don't want to go out bush, I don't want to go and work out in the country. Maybe that's changing a bit now, but so yeah, we worked on that. Got a lot of support. We've got a lot of support from the Shire and also the local businesses, and we got a lot of support from the state government at the time with the Perth Working Group, and did a lot of work. But typical of some of the things I try and do is probably didn't fit in the square funding hole, so it was sort of, everyone loved the idea, but it just didn't fit things. The Shire are really good. They funded a position in the end. And actually what happened pretty much at the same time, they opened up the skilled migration visa. So a lot of the local businesses were able to, bring people in from overseas on that and meet their labour demand, which was fantastic. But all that money was being sent back to, predominantly a lot of them were from the Philippines, but from all over the world. I think when we finished, when I sort of wasn't involved with that project back in 2015, I think there was about 43 different nationalities in in Dalwalny. So it was amazing, and it's continued to be amazing. But so what we did, we pivoted and we said to them, why don't you bring your families out to Australia? And it was an amazing experience. We held English classes for them. We invited them to bring their families out. We assisted in that process. The Dalwalny school itself's doubled. There's so many of them have become Australian citizens and bought houses in Dalwalny.
Amazing.
I think we estimated internally that our population had increased by about 15%.
Wow.
Dalwalny is just a cracking town. It really is. And look, it had to have those businesses. You had to have those businesses to actually have jobs for people. People need jobs. But what we did differently, we weren't the only town in Australia that were using 457s, but we were the one that said, we want them to be permanent residents. We want them to bring their families. And they're really, like now, just starting to get super involved in the community. It's just unbelievable. It's just one of the most amazing success stories, but it didn't happen by chance. Like nothing ever happens by chance. Like you've just got to do a little bit of work here and there to make some of those things happen and get people to recognise the opportunities and the potential. So still a lot of work to be done, but it's fantastic.
100%, mate. Hey, Stuart, do you want to just stand up a little bit and show us your shirt there? I'm pretty sure it's got a pretty cool message on it.
Oh yeah, it's probably
soil power.
Down.
Yeah,
soil
buddy.
Power, yeah.
Dirty, clean food. There you go, folks.
Dirty, clean food. So I like the shirt.
I saw you wearing it at the COP28 too. Did you get it?
I did. Yeah, I took my my nice suit over there to wear, and anyway, I don't know. I just sort of said to the organiser, I said, "Oh, do you want me to wear that, or do you want me to wear this?" No, we're gonna wear that. So,
wicked.
So it was good. It was good.
Bloody good, Stuart. Mate, just the last one, I reckon, and we'll round her off. I know you've probably got a million jobs to do now. You're back home and got to get stuff done. But so where are you focusing next, mate? What's in the pipeline for you, and what are your goals for 2024?
Yeah, well, recover from what was a very bad year last year financially.
Yes.
Fortunately, I took out a bit of weather insurance, which has helped soften that blow a little bit. But yeah, look, the next big exciting tool for me, I think, is virtual fencing. So I am just about to. I'd like to do my whole herd, but obviously a bit cash strapped at the moment. I might explore some opportunities for grant funding. But is to be able to have that ability to really manage the landscape effectively. You know, I've got a rehydration project with balloon happening here as well. And
cool.
Yeah, I estimated that if I was to replace the fencing that I've got, that it's going to need doing probably immediately, but at least in the next 10 years, there's probably 70 kilometres of fencing.
Wow.
And then, you know, that's not necessarily in the right spot as you start sort of redesigning the landscape. I want to get more perennial fodder shrubs in, shelter pelts, reorganise my watering points, and be able to manage those animals really, really effectively as a tool within the landscape. So I think that's a game changer for me, because I think I've never quite been able to understand how feedlotting animals can be more effective than grazing, and part of that is actually managing that grazing effectively. And it's a little bit easier on small paddocks in the southwest moving an electric fence, but when it's been 40 degrees forever, this year I've never seen anything like it, and you know, they don't earth out that well. You know, strip fencing doesn't actually work that well because it's just not a great earth. So so to me, I think that's going to be a game changer, because I think we can diversify the way we build our soil health with a lot more varieties. We can create planting on the contour and straighten it up with biodiversity plantings and fodder shrubs that get us through the inevitable dry periods and droughts that we're going to have. Like, I think we've got to manage our whole landscape. So, you know, if I could have a wish, you know, if I could have an angel rock up on the door and actually enable me to design my farm like I think it should do, then I think we could set up a really good example of, I think, where we could go to in the future if I'm left to do it self-funded. I may not be able to do it in the time frame that I'd like to.
Yeah.
So that's important for me. I mean, I've had a dream since I can ever remember about showing people how beautiful it is and living out in regional areas. And I can remember in my early years, probably before I went away to boarding school in the mid-70s, what we lost off this farm to salinity was, I can remember, some of the beautiful bottle brushes that grew around some of the lakes on the farm. And that's always been an inspiration of me to try and return to that somehow. Still a lot of work to do, but so I think that is important, but the whole system's broken, and hence my involvement in repopulation and trying to improve infrastructure, research with the Liebe Group, food systems, wide open agriculture, and how do we and it's bloody hard to break into the food system because the margins are so small. But how do we create a pipeline from regenerative farmers to regenerative households, that want to actually, partake in food that is going to be better for them, and how do we make it affordable? So, it was one of the messages that I delivered at COP. It's not just the farming system that's broken; the whole system's broken.
Yes.
The medical system. So we need to take a regenerative approach to all that, and an integration of fixing everything at once. And I think that I'm probably lucky that I've always been working in that space for a long time. So I understand that it's all important, and you can't have one without the other. Like you can't just focus on one area because that cannot survive without the circular sort of system that basically encompasses the whole supply chain. So for me, it's continuing to tell my story and trying to inspire that change from finance through to research, everything, to actually do the work and do the science, the holistic science, the long-term changes that are required for change before it's too late, basically. And my hope is that, from what I've seen this year, is that there's a big push. I'm not sure that they've quite got hold of it and what's, how to do it, but the intention is really, really big, and that's exciting. And when I look at, the younger generation, the young people that are coming through, I see a greater understanding of what we need to do, and some of my generation and beyond and a bit younger sort of grappling onto sort of old ways and thinking that we'll make it work. I don't know whether we will, So it's just getting out there and trying to keep what I'm doing and trying to just, I guess, be part of discussions for change, but to also be inspiring people that, it's not all muck and mystery. It's real, it's exciting, and it's really, really rewarding.
Absolutely, Stewie, and you're a bloody change maker, mate. And we're grateful for the work that you do, and keep on telling your story, mate. And thanks for telling it here today. And hopefully, we can touch base again in the months to come and see how it's all going, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks very much for taking the time out to have a chat.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, guys. You've been listening to the Mind, Body, Soil podcast. Keep growing. Stay free. We hope you enjoy. Kaboom, you made it. You made it to the end of the show. You've been watching the Mind, Body, Soil podcast hosted by Smart Soil. SmartSoilEDU.com is the place to be for all your latest and greatest regenerative agriculture courses, free media content, town halls with experts, and heaps of other exciting stuff. Make sure you head on over to SmartSoilEDU.com and become a part of the tribe. See you next time. Thank you.